Okay, before we launch into this episode at all, Dave, you go out into the wilderness for weeks at a time and stuff, but more than anybody else I know, you are the person that travels through small towns and little road stops and like little mom and pop stores just in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, it's off-putting sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What is one thing that, like, about this kind of civilization, as opposed to the majority of our listeners live in, like, North American cities and towns? Like, when you get into the small backwoods out in the middle of nowhere places, and you have to go in and interact with people, what's the thing that most people don't take into consideration? Or what's one tip you would have for people?
Carry cash.
Yeah?
Cash is king. Your fancy plastic cards don't work in the woods. That is very, very, very important. When you go to these little back road communities and stuff, they don't take that stuff. This newfangled technology doesn't exist out there.
Still, huh?
A lot of places,
2023?
a lot of places, like they get charged for it, so they never really adopted it. A lot of the people that live around there live on cash already. They work cash jobs. There's no bank, so they just send. It's a big circle, right? Like it's just
Yeah, what goes around comes around.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
It's their own little ecosystem there.
More or less.
Have you ever like traded or like given cash for anything out in the bush when you've met like other hunters or you're out camping and someone else comes by?
I mean, when we were young, we come across people stuck. There's a really popular 4x4ing area out somewhere near here.
Yeah.
And people go there all the time, and if you get stuck, you can go up there and pull people out, and people will give you, $40 or a bottle of vodka or whatever they have with them. Liquor is also currency in the backwoods.
That's something that I don't think I've ever seen in D&D. Is liquor
is
being
currency?
Currency.
Yeah, no, it very much is. Like it helps to have, just hey, have a beer or
And it
whatever.
fucking would be too in D&D. Like fine elven wine would go a long freaking way at a Furbolg encampment out in the middle of
I don't think
nowhere.
it'd be used as currency in D&D. I think it'd be more used as gifts or barter on a large scale. So it'd be between ship captains. I'll trade you 4 flagons of ale for 4 flagons of mead.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or this fine bottle of elven wine to the noble of the town to get in good with gratiated him. I wouldn't see it used as a money system.
Yeah. It's not so much give me that you've caught 3 rabbits. Here's a wineskin of whatever it would be. Yeah, I like that better actually.
You just got to be really careful though, because like people are there, they can smell a city slicker from a mile away. I had a buddy who's very much wears that hat, and he had trouble out in the backwoods, and the local good old boys came by and helped him out, drank all his beer, and hung out with him. And drove him around drunk to find his friends. Like, it's a double-edged sword. Like, don't be smart. Like, you can't.
Yeah. Just because they're out in the middle of nowhere doesn't mean that they aren't crafty as shit and ready to take what you got. Yeah.
Welcome to the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get.
Welcome back to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. Today we're continuing our discussion on DM tips in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm Adam, and with me today are James and Dave, and this episode is called Settlements, Pros and Cons for Constructing Buildings and Building Structures Like a Pro.
In this episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, this panel of Dungeon Masters will be exploring some concepts around town designs for when you want to build a homebrew town or when you want to flesh out a town that already exists.
Before we get started, I want to ask, do you add plumbing to your medieval buildings?
Yeah, okay, let's roll initiative.
Well, I had a 5, but you knocked me to an 11, but I'm still going last.
James is at a 6, and I knocked to a 16, and I got a 15. All right, James.
Yes, for convenience. Just one less thing for the players to worry about, one less disease point for the town to worry about. There's magic going around. You can prestidigitate that away. Just assume it's in the toilet bowl.
Love it. Yeah, okay. In a world of create and destroy water and prestidigitation and shit, like...
There's, no point not to have some kind of plumbing.
Magical plumbing.
So, yeah, but okay, so the way that it works is if you cast the same spell at the same thing every day for 100 days in a row, it becomes permanent. And that's how you get items with spell effects on them. So if you were to cast prestidigitation, right? Or create or destroy water, right? You're creating water in this barrel every day for 100
Those
days.
are all low-level spells, too.
Yep.
So that can be part of the training at the Mages Guild.
Exactly.
You cast on this every single day for 100 days. They sell the toilet.
I often add plumbing. One of my favorite things to do in every building that I design myself, that I homebrew, is I will have a handful of really important looking doors, like your average door inside a house now usually has some sort of detailing on it and like a decent like knob or handle. Sometimes I got a lock or whatnot, and then I will have just a couple of like clearly closet doors and then one in the middle, and that one's always the bathroom. And at this point, Dan has figured it out. But every once in a while, like a noble's house, you get into a manor of some sort, all of the doors look the same, and I just keep hiding bathrooms behind important-looking doors and like out in the hallways, and it's always like a weird little disappointment. But then I always put like shit in the bathroom to deal with. There's always a ghost or a booby trap or a magic item or a scrap of a note inside one of the drawers or something every time. So I love bathrooms in D&D. No one ever expects it.
Interesting. I never really considered that while we were playing. Like, yeah, we come across them, but I just, okay, sure.
Yeah, I found the shithole. Next. Yeah, there's always a clue or an encounter or something.
I am not digging through that pile for the clue.
Let me tell you, Dan did that one time. I had an outhouse. So he's like, this is a weird detail.
In D&D, right?
I mean,
Dan.
yeah. So no, I had a bunch of graffiti inside the outhouse, and so he went in and closed the door. But the graffiti it said like look down for more info, and he had to stick his head in the fucking shithole. And sure enough, there was like a secret passcode to be able to get into a magically warded area.
You did that on purpose, specifically for Dan, didn't you?
I didn't think it would be him. At that point, I thought it was Terry that was going in.
Okay.
So yeah,
fair enough.
Anyway. Dave, do you do plumbing at all?
I never really considered it. That's one of I've said it 100 times. I have quick games. We don't really get bogged down to details.
Yeah.
I never really considered it. We have played in areas that have, we go down into the sewers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's the sewers in Sharn in Eberron, right? Like, there's...
Yeah. Yeah, there are aqueducts in some of them as well.
I've absolutely used it, but not consciously. It's just kind of been a byproduct of the setting.
There's also multiple kinds of sewers. Is it just a runoff sewer to deal with the excess water on the streets, or is it a refuge?
Yeah, sanitary sewer, storm
sewer.
sewer.
A bunch, and most of D&D, I would assume, has been storm sewers.
It's funny, every time that I will have waste sewers there, but then I have oozes that are captured and they feed and thrive. The myconids will live under my city. Kobolds are my sewage workers, because they've got sunlight sensitivity and they're fine down there, and they will tunnel and make more spaces as the town needs more. So I often think about this kind of weird infrastructure, and since I've been working at an air balancing company, I've got ductwork and shit, not real ductwork, but chimneys and where chimneys are popping out of, how many chimneys. I think about all of that. You end up on the roof, there are an equal number of chimneys to fireplaces. And if you stack, the first story on top of the second story on the map, the fireplaces are directly over top of each other, so they can share the same flue. I do that level of shit now. I never did that before, so it's funny to think about. Next is going to be electricity. Anyway, before I rant any more about that, let's cut to an ad break.
We previously covered quite a bit in our discussion on Dungeon Master Tips in 5th edition. For all those episodes and more, you can follow or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and dozens of other podcast apps. And if you'd like to support us, you can donate through the website, check our store, or join our Patreon and get access to other episodes and series. If you'd like to pay for some ad space on It's a Mimic, or just shout out to a friend, please reach out to us through our email and website that are listed in the show notes below.
This week has been a little wild for It's a Mimic. On Monday, we ended up dropping episode 250. 250. I can't believe it. Today, obviously, this is episode 251. But also, yesterday, we released for the patrons of Silver Tier and above a bonus episode on the playable race that Dan and I hate the most. But on top of all of that, on Wednesday, there's a Pantheon episode for Silver Tier patrons, and then Bronze Tier patrons get a Legend Lore on Thursday and a Legend Lore online that ties into that one on Friday. And then on all the public channels, we've got an Undead episode for Thursday, and then Friday gives us a Platinum Great Warren episode about building a town. which ties directly, of course, into this episode. So we hope that there's enough here so that everyone can finish off 2023 with a big smile on their face, and we hope everyone was able to have a safe and happy holiday season. Let's get back to the episode. Okay, so the very first thing that I want to talk about really quickly here is why here? I want to talk about rest stops, right? Because these are the points in between civilizations, and we have to stop and think about why we have a rest stop here. One of my big complaints that I've seen in games and whatnot is people travel for 12 hours out, like down the road, and there's nothing there, especially on major routes between cities. There should be at least a watering hole or a wide spot for camping.
Yeah, or an inn or somewhere to get a bite to eat. Like that, it seems like someone would have capitalized on the fact that there needs to be a waypoint here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think about Weathertop from Lord of the Rings as well. Like, when they go there in the books, people have been here. They've camped here before. Like, they're not up on the top. There's like this little cave halfway up where people stop, and there's like clearly a campsite here.
All right. So, okay, do a little bit of like local here. You know Princeton.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming out of Princeton towards Vancouver, there's that like super windy highway, okay?
Yeah.
And there's a couple of big switchback corners, and you, as you're coming out of town, you hit like Friday Creek, Saturday Creek, Sunday Creek. And that was as like it was an old mining town, and the old like horse train coming out of town, that would be where they would stop on Fridays, because it would leave town on every Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
And it would stop here Friday, and then here Saturday, and then here Sunday. So same kind of idea. Like there's these waypoints around, you know.
When you're thinking about how much horses need to rest, how much people walking need to stop, or you know how often weather patterns change, how quickly they change, this is going to dictate where you have your rest points, right?
Rivers too. That's a big
I was
thing.
about to say geography as well. If you've got large inclines, declines, or anywhere where there's fresh water, these will be places, even if it's just a horse stop, right?
Yeah, horses need to drink, right?
Yeah.
For me, the one thing I think of with D&D is we're traveling usually further distances.
Mm-hmm.
Things are a lot further apart, so the stops should be further apart. So normally when we'd have a stop 3 hours apart, this one will be a minimum of 6 hours, just because they're traveling twice as far. And everything has some kind of magic in it. Whether you're a magic user or not, you still have access to the men in the air, essentially. So beasts would have that too. So I assume everything has a better stamina. So they can go further, do more before we have to care about stops.
Yeah, also when we're telling the narrative story of Dungeons & Dragons, it's very much like everyone's operating at peak capacity.
Yeah.
Like every horse has all of their hit points back
All
and
the time.
no exhaustion.
Yeah.
You know, every single morning, right? Doesn't matter how many days on the wagon trail you spent, that horse is fresh on day 73, right? So you're always getting your 8 to 12 hours out of a horse. Right?
As it should be.
Fucking lazy ass horses. But one of the other things that I'd like to think about as well is whenever I've got large crossroads, I try to put some sort of trading post, right? If you've got 3 or 4 kingdoms that are all spread out in the land, and there are 2 major like through points, these are going to be highways or roads or even paths. They're going to cross. If you have an intersection in the middle of fucking nowhere, someone at some point has said to themselves, if I put up a small structure here, even if it's just a small pavilion,
People will stop.
people will stop. And I will be able to get a couple of the little wares that they weren't able to sell at the last place, and they're going to give me a discount to sell them here. And these might be things that people need on the road, or if you're heading into town for other cities, the farmers going through may need an extra blanket, or, a wagon wheel broke, right? And not everybody has the ability to just cast mending, right? I try to cater to the common traveler that doesn't have access to magic, and then add more magical shit to it to make it feel a little bit more special and fantastical. So I tend to think about trade, and then I think about resources as well. Because another thing is, when you look at a settlement, a medieval settlement, and you have a castle or a town or whatnot, you guys know how many square miles outside of it are farmland?
Like 43?
Like, it's so fucking much, right? To be able to support that, like, the population. That's more than a single 8-hour day, like, for a lot of farmers. Like, it's going to take all day to get into town. There will be little rest stops and small little taverns and stuff at different waypoints on major roads going into cities as well. So you don't even have to go out in the middle of fucking nowhere. You can stop in kind of the rural area and grab a bite to eat, rest the horses. Even if you traveled extra hard to get to the town, but you didn't make it in time, the weather or whatever, there's going to be somewhere to stop on the outskirts. So you don't even have to get past the civilization. You can still find little rest stops in the outskirts of the civilization as well. I think that's a lot of what you see, actually, Dave, out in the bush.
Yeah.
Like, there's a big difference between downtown Vancouver and, like, Hope,
yeah.
And then, like...
When I'm going out, these big, like, crossroads, these are places, these bustling cities, like 100 Mile House. and 108 Mile House.
For those of you that don't know British Columbia, these are podunk little...
All right,
places.
it is big enough that it has an A&W, okay? That is important. All right,
Not big enough to have a Tim Hortons, though.
It might.
It might in the gas station.
Yeah.
It's not a real Tim Hortons. It doesn't count.
No.
I don't know. It might. 100 Miles kind of like the hub of the region, so it might.
108 Mile doesn't have a Canadian Tire, though.
No.
That's you can tell if you're a real city in Canada. Is there a Canadian Tire? So, I want to talk about roadside inns for a minute here, okay? Because as we move up towards settlements and civilizations, I want to just touch on this because the trope is of you meet in a tavern out in the middle of nowhere, and then off you go on an adventure. Or you're in a tavern in a very small village, and now it's time to go fight those 8 goblins that stole the blacksmith's daughter, or whatever. Also, is there like a goblin slave trade of blacksmith's daughters? Can we just acknowledge that for a second? Like, there's something odd about that.
We're not acknowledging that yet.
No, okay.
No.
All right.
I'm not going to acknowledge goblins.
First and foremost, I want to talk about the difference between the different kind of roadside rest stops. So there's the inn, the tavern, the campsite, and what I consider to be like the traveler's waypoint. So the roadside inn has places for people to stop and get a full night's rest. They have rooms. They are an inn. This is probably going to have a restaurant of some sort and maybe even stables attached to it as well for people to like put their horses in or lock their wagons up or carts or whatever they have. There's a protected area, probably a large fence around, and a decent sized place, which means that this is enough of a place for people to live full time. There's probably a vegetable garden out back. You probably have a decent sized backyard. There's probably piles of stacked chopped wood.
So to like equate this to something that I'm familiar with, something like the Prancing Pony out of Lord of the Rings, right? You go in, you've got your full beds upstairs, you've got meal service, like
but I'm thinking the one that's out, like it's literally roadside, so there's no community around it, right? You would just have
self-sufficient.
It's going to be relatively self-sufficient. It still relies on trade. It's still going to have like the weekly dwarven ale like drop off, right? Or it could be part of a monastery that brews its own thing, right? And then has a inn out front to help people, right? But you're going to end up dealing with an innkeeper, a bartender, whatever staff is there, and then probably their families as well, because you're out here in the middle of nowhere. And so I often will have in a roadside inn kids running around.
Yeah.
At a roadside tavern, there's very limited accommodations. Like, the staff lives here, but you are encouraged to go camp outside. There might be a spare room or two, maybe, that's like guest rooms for them that you might be able to barter your way into, but like...
If you pass out at the table, they're probably not going to throw you out at the end of the night.
Yeah, they'll let you sleep under the table, but for a fee, right? So, the thing about a roadside tavern as opposed to a roadside inn is, as much as the inn has like this defensible idea of fences and a place to lock up your horses and whatnot, just because bandits and predators and whatnot, at a tavern, which is a bar, you got bouncers. So you still have a bartender, you still have staff, and you might have their families, but now you have enforcement as well. The bartender probably has a +3 great axe above the bar, right?
Yeah, because it's not a shotgun.
It's not a shotgun, no. Yeah, everybody draws their magic missiles, their wands of magic missile, and points at each other, and this is your... For a campsite, you got to think about what the accommodations are there. Is somebody run the place? You got to wonder, how is this going to be different as far as who's in charge? What are the rules here? There are very clearly rules when you walk into somebody else's establishment. If this is a communal open space by a watering hole, who's in charge? Is it might makes right? Is there someone who's consistently posted up here that's going to be, I don't know, selling firewood or
Yeah, this is like the typical campsite I'm imagining. It's got like all these different little mini sites, some places to have your own individual spots, but it's probably maybe got a host, right?
Yeah.
Someone that takes care of things, but it's all very loosey-goosey down by the river, you know.
Yeah, I'm
No
thinking.
no structure really.
No, you're gonna have your satyr or your furbolg running the place. A satyr runs the one that's meant for the frat kids to go to, right? But
Yeah.
but it's going to be a little bit more earthy, and you're not going to get into the good night's sleep in a bed.
I'm just imagining like instead of an RV park, it's just like a bunch of covered wagons.
But like absolutely, and why wouldn't there be places like this? And if you're thinking about, oh, I'm going to have an encounter at a roadside inn at a tavern of some sort, why wouldn't you put it at a campsite, which is even more wide open and full of more strangers milling about? And then there's, just the Traveler's Waypoint, like we mentioned before, Weathertop. So, like, this is where you're reliant upon geography. Hey, there's a bunch of rocky outcroppings here for people to take shelter in because it does blizzard. There is hail, right? There's going to be old ruins that people have, like, these ruins existed here for a specific reason thousands of years ago. Now they're being co-opted by travelers as a safe haven, right? Maybe even just as a windbreak. You're going to be dealing now with more shared structures and more open areas when you've got other strangers. You may come into this rest point and find someone else is already camping there. Or it's the middle of the night and your second watch is up and somebody walks out of the wilderness going, oh, thank God I finally made it. I knew if I pushed on another 4 hours I could get here in time. Hi, my name is, who are you?
That happens.
That does happen.
Yeah, often.
Yeah. And so you got to think about what are the resources that are going to attract people here. A lot of the times it's just simply shelter. But it's even better if you can add water. So, I got a couple of questions. Let's grab dice and roll.
Okay. Ooh, 17.
I got a 5. James, you're going first. What's the big difference between a roadside inn and an in-town hotel?
What's around it, really? In town, there's a community sitting around it, so there's a lot more to pull from that. The event that causes your party to start off may not be caused in the tavern. The burglar, the villain, whatever may run through the tavern, which brings them into the events.
I like the idea of making it a little, like, more rustic. When in these roadside taverns, the chairs are going to be made out of, like, locally sourced trees. Right? Like, you know that they went out back and had someone come in to make some chair. They didn't ship their chairs in.
No.
Right? They had all this stuff done on site. So you apply that to all of the...
You're not going to have velvet curtains. They're made of skins and...
Yeah, like you get... Yes, you're not going to have glasses. You're going to have probably clay tankards.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. Right? You're going to get the finer quality when you get to the inner town kind of thing.
The other thing that I would say is the size of the clientele is going to be a whole lot different. When you're in town, there's going to be a lot of people that stay for 1 night or 2 nights, but at a roadside tavern, I think people will stay for a few days and rest up. I also think that when you are at a roadside tavern, the people that run the place know who's there. They measure up the size of the people coming in to check in, right? And they have a basic idea of who's there. If you walk in, you can walk up to like a roadside inn and say, hi, yeah, we're looking for a couple of nights. Do you have anywhere we can stop and get some food? Do you know if there's anybody here that deals in pottery? Or is there anyone that's coming through with any extra feed that they may be holding on to? And they're
Or
gonna
can fix a horseshoe, right?
we've got some stuff that we can offer if anyone's interested for trading, if you don't mind putting the word out. And I think in a roadside tavern, they're willing to do that. In a major city, I don't know, man, go to the store, right? They're not...
What, do they not have a concierge?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's going to be that level of people will always be looking for an angle out in the middle of nowhere to just improve their lives to some degree. I'm not saying they're hustling, but they're definitely saying, hey, you know what, I can do this. Your artificer should post up. Everybody says the bard will then, after dinner, will go up on stage and start to sing and play. Sure, the artificer should be walking around going, do you guys need anything fixed? Or can I help with anything? Like the cleric can sit there and go, are there any religious people here that need a service done? I'm here the next 3 days. right? Like, it can be this kind of interaction. And your druid is just selling pot in the corner. That's
Who's already doing that? You showed up. That's why they're there.
when renting rooms, do you keep the party together in one large room or do you split them up?
99% of my characters will rather be split up.
Yeah.
Most of my characters don't trust the party they're with, because most of them are stealing bastards.
And most of them are in a party with you, James.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a murdering bastard, not a stealing bastard.
It's
There's
safer
a
for
difference.
the rest of us.
Yeah.
I let them keep their things while they're alive.
But while they're alive is the problem, James.
I don't think I've only killed one party member intentionally.
So far.
Unintentionally is
Yeah, a lot.
a lot, yeah.
Is none of your business.
Next time, have evasion,
I think
bitches.
I've done it to Justice's characters twice unintentionally.
He'll get over it.
No, I don't think you will.
Dave,
What was it?
do you let them sleep in one large room?
Oh, it depends on the scenario. It changes. Right? If we're going through, like a little... If it's a friendly area, yeah, sure, maybe they want their own rooms to kind of like stop and have some alone time. If it's, kind of going through enemy territory, or, maybe this isn't run by the nice humans, it's run by the evil goblins, maybe y'all stay together for safety, you have watches, that kind of thing. But I really just let the players choose. I don't care.
I absolutely let them choose. What just happened at the end of our last session was the entire party boarded a boat. You missed it, Dave. You're on a boat now.
Yay!
So
I'm on a boat.
they're on a boat. The cargo hold is empty because everyone's heading, like the ship is heading back to a town. And you guys have managed to work your way onto the boat in the middle of their voyage, right? So they got everybody on board, and they said, you have the option, because we have helped refugees in the past. We have all sorts of hammocks and stuff. The cargo hold can be transformed very easily into communal quarters, or we've got some spare quarters. It's 2 per, but they're pretty small. What do you guys want to do? And the party looked at each other, and some people said, oh, we're going to sleep in the main cargo hold. And a couple said, well, I'm going to have my own room if they're going to do that. So they split the party up. And then they sat there, looked at each other, and went, was this a bad idea? I think we could trust these people. But was this a bad idea?
It was a bad idea.
Well, in the meta knowledge, they have met this crew in the past. Like the previous campaign met this crew, and they were good guys. So they're pretty sure that it's safe. But
No.
but there's a couple of new faces, and other people are gone, and it's
Don't trust anyone on a boat.
don't trust.
It's a
anyone on
lesson
the boat.
I've learned.
How many boats do you go on?
My ancestors went on one.
Okay, all right, never mind. I retract my question.
I'm uncomfortable.
We were offered free cruise once.
I'm pretty sure you paid for it, but do you get into the nitty-gritty details of fares and prices when it comes to accommodations and food? Or, at what point do you just hand-wave that shit?
Almost always.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it a waste of time.
Yeah, you guys are going to have at least enough gold to pay
Yeah.
for a room for a night. Come on, move on.
Yeah, the party will have enough gold or enough ability to commit a service.
I barely
For the
track your
place.
gold. I'm not going to track your silver.
No.
Right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, there's that. I use Call of Cthulhu rules. I say, hey, it's reasonable that this is how much you would spend in a day. If you are going to be spending an inordinate amount, if it's a ridiculous amount of money that you want to spend, track that shit on your sheets. Right? If you show up at the inn and you say, we're going to buy everyone's horses because we're going to go. Yeah, whip out your character sheets. We're going to sit down and go over the gold. I'm going to buy an extra flagon of ale. Nope. Yep, you do that. Just fine. Copper comes and copper goes. Right? We just assume. So, what's one opportunity for a plot hook or a set-piece encounter? You can choose one. Roadside inn, cavern, campsite, or traveler's waypoint. Do you have just a quick thing off the top of your head that would be really interesting in one of these?
From a campsite, the party doesn't wake up at camp anymore. They wake up in town.
Oh no. Oh no. You see, I did that to my party, and it was a false hydra. They walked into the woods.
I don't remember this.
Yeah. and suddenly they woke up in town with you guys ended up on the outskirts of town, walking into town going, huh, this is a pretty town, and got there and realized they'd already been there. And so you had gone to sleep in your beds and then woke up in the woods with no memory of the town ever in the first place. I love that shit. That's fucky.
Yeah. Give no excuse either.
Yeah.
Never address it.
Oh, just never address it.
Never address it.
It just happens like once a tier, just to fuck.
Not even, just once. And they'll always remember it.
One thing I kind of liked was I heard about this story during the gold rush, where these guys would go in and set up these little shops along, the trail, but they would make sure that they would be the only people to get pickaxes or the only people to get blankets. So people had to go to them, and then they would charge, people of different races, different amounts for the same equipment, right?
Yeah.
But I like the idea of your heroes going in and like breaking up that racket. This whole, there's this scummy, like, underbelly criminal organization that's running all of these roadside taverns, and
I did that to Mieka's character, although they were there was a mercenary guild that was running tolls up and down. Yeah. So every time that you stopped somewhere, you get up in the morning and there would be somebody outside in a red cloak with a giant pouch on their belt and their hand outstretched, going, "Well, you spent another night on our road. That's another 5 gold, please." And then the people that couldn't pay would get pulled out, pulled off to the side and get their asses handed to them. And they get their asses kicked. There they go, back with 1 hit point, off onto their adventures again. By the way, don't be on our road tomorrow if you can't pay, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was that. She broke that ring up pretty good. So my big thing is I think every campsite and in anywhere that you're going to stop that isn't just like a tavern, right? This isn't a restaurant. If you're going to stay somewhere, it should be haunted, right? Like there should just be, we went and we checked in and we're in this room, and then at 3 a.m, somebody opens the door and is shocked. Why are you in here? Well, we checked in. No, you didn't. I'm the host. I've never seen you before. How did you get here? Well, the woman at the front. Oh, God. What did she look like? Old, gray hair, was wearing a purple shawl. So you've seen our resident ghost, and she checked you in. Anyway, you owe us. Pay up front, please. Right? Mm-hmm. So, there should just be ghosts everywhere.
Or demons. I mean, crossroads, waypoints.
Oh, yeah.
Demons.
There we go. Oh, yeah, that merchant at the crossroads.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always have the best deals.
I just had a player turn down an opportunity to get warlock levels from a deal.
What was the deal?
I will give you an extra level of power.
Define extra level. Am I going from level 4 to level 5?
Yeah, it was level 6, level 7.
Level 6 to level 7. Am I actually going to level 6 to level 7, or just getting the additional power level to level 7?
No. You get an entire warlock level on top of everything else you get for free.
So in essence, I could go to level essentially 21. 20 in my normal stats, and then 1 in warlock.
Yeah.
Well, that's an easy sell, soul.
Yep.
What was the price?
Oh, we'll figure it out later.
Oh, wow.
No. You're not going to get an open-ended deal from me. No blank checks.
No, it was very much it was hags. And there were hags going, "Hey, we really like what your deal is and what you're doing and whatnot. And we have some information that you may want. We're willing to power you up because we have a common enemy. Do you want the power?" And it was Charlie. And Charlie's like, "Absolutely, I want that power." "No, we're not. We don't have this deal. Absolutely not." And we were rolling persuasion and insight, and it was a hell of a tense session. Also, Casey was suffocating in the other room, and only Charlie knew it. So
yeah, we'll get there. It's fine.
Yeah.
So there was a time limit on this as well, and so finally, he got away. But good times. What's a wild and flavorful NPC you might find while stopping at a rest stop?
There's a lot of people you can find at a gold dragon or a copper dragon, whatever one that likes people more. Can't remember what dragon color it is.
Brass and copper. Copper does practical jokes. Brass is
so they act as the campsite warden or whatever, but their goal is to find people. So they'll find a certain people they want, and you'll find someone that's similar to this guy again at another campground if he likes you. So he's following these people around till they do something good or until they need that last little push to do something good, and then he gives them that push, gives him that power, but now he's responsible for their victory. Now he can claim rights across what they won.
I fucking love that too. As you guys are traveling, you can see overhead a massive dragon flies.
Not that obvious.
No, I would be like flies above you, and then like hours later you get to a campsite. There's a person who's been polymorphed, and it's the dragon. Is like, oh, hey, how you going? How's it going? And there's always like a furball. Like they always pick the same little just off race. Like it's a Goliath or something. Really friendly Goliath that runs the place. Then the next day at about noon, a massive dragon flies overhead the same direction. This guy just leapfrogging you over and over again. I wonder how long it would take for people to figure that out.
See, I wouldn't do the flying over. He teleports wherever he needs to go because he's got hundreds of people he's watching.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got a whole bunch of little heroes he sent off into the world, giving them their boosts, their advantages.
Oh, I love how condescending that is. 100 just little heroes.
Yeah, and that's the point. He's supposed
I love
to be
it. I love
condescending.
it. No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
These are little playthings for him. These are little toys to go off into the world.
The musings, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dave, interesting NPC.
Well, I mean, there's some like favorites, the good old Bernard the Bard, but I think the one that stands out to me the most was I had a DM one time who had this like quirky little gnome tinkerer that would show up, and he would have these weird little mechanism trap kind of things, and you had the opportunity to buy them, and they were always different. It would be like a little pouch that you'd throw and it would bust open with a little cloud of some sort of not magical, like some sort of natural, like maybe not quite alchemy, but
Yeah, he's playing with powders and stuff.
yeah. There's weird stuff going on, but it was all trinkety and there was some like mechanism and stuff to them. It was really interesting because the DM would sit down and come up with all these different little trinkets, and he would explain how they would all work specifically and kind of like lay it all out, and it really had a good knack for it. That was about all they had a knack for, though, but it was kind of a neat little quirky character to kind of run into every so often. You get to this waypoint and you get the opportunity to buy these once in a blue moon, non-magical, mundane, neat trinkets. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to do a non-humanoid. I tend to do this at most of my friendly places now, where I will put a tressum so that it's a cat with wings, right? And they always have just a little bit of attitude, and they're not interested in hanging out with most of the party members, but they'll latch on to like one, right? And so I would like to have a unicorn that doesn't speak, who's just at the campsite and is there and never leaves. Like, it's their campsite, and everyone else is allowed to be there with them. And if tensions rise, the unicorn steps forward and watches. And like, it's just this presence, right? So
do the unicorn where only one party member can see it, and you text them that. You don't say it out loud in front of everyone. You see a unicorn standing in the corner.
That's
and
really
just
fun.
You.
That's really fun.
There's a campsite up West Harrison that you can only get to with a 4-wheel drive. And on the way in, there's occasionally llamas just hanging out on the road.
Oh, is this like the peacocks that just exist out in Surrey for no reason?
Yeah, but it's just like, it's very, very sparse. Like every so often, there'll be a sighting of the llamas.
The sighting of the llamas.
Yeah.
My problem with having an invisible creature that only one person can see is, at my table, Megan, Dan, Charlie, and Mieka will assume that it's an It Follows scenario, or, okay, this thing is here to kill us and only I can see it, right?
Let's say you pick your player carefully, like Dave or me as a player. I wouldn't attack it right away. I would watch it and figure out if I can get something from it.
Well, okay, there's that.
Dave wouldn't attack it right away either.
It depends. If I'm just like the dumb barbarian, I might try to put an axe through it.
Well, once again, pick your character.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a minute about settlements. We've talked about these little meeting spots that are out there for people that are going between settlements. But first of all, when we look at the map, assuming that we're building a homebrew world and we're going to put down cities and settlements in different places, we got to think about the travel between, how many rests, how many days in between, and what's the weather going to be like. I'm actually going to string settlements closer together if we're up in the Arctic or we're out in the desert, and you absolutely need to go from settlement to settlement. If you veer off the path, you're fucked.
Yeah, if you're out for more than a day or two, exposure will kill you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's one thing that I think about. I then look at geography. I'm not going to put a whole lot of settlements at the top of mountains unless it's going to be one of those reclusive monasteries or something, right? or a Goliath. And you want to go deal with the Goliaths? They're up there, but they're not on the way there, right? People tend to go the path of least resistance when they travel, which means valleys. That means lowland, not highland, if they can help it. I'm going to look at the easiest way to trade. A lot of times that's up and down a coast, and so I put a lot of settlements on coasts and on major rivers. I mean, Canada was pretty much founded entirely on major rivers and coasts, and how long it takes to get across the prairies, right? So, and then I look at what resources are available. Things like water. Is the ground able to be farmed? Is there natural protection, a barrier on one side or another? Like the fact that there was Helm's Deep was built up into a cliff face, into a series of mountains, just so that they could have a defensible place to to fall back to. And then the proximity to something fantastic, which is something I think we forget about in the regular world, but was very much a thing in ancient times, where things like holy sites and places of what was considered great power would be where civilizations would pop up. A lot of times it was unforeseen natural things like, oh, people just live longer in this area. Well, yeah, man, you have easy irrigation here that happens, right? But in a fantastical situation, there would be places where gods have touched down, or there are magical hotspots where the ley lines cross, or there's a natural portal to the Feywild, so fruit grows bigger here or something, right? Like, there would be places like this. And then we got to stop and think about the sizes. I had a hard time with this. I sat and thought real long and hard about it. How big are settlements? Because what we have in our fantasy, our medieval fantasy, is not how shit actually worked in real life. Not by a damn sight. The settlement, like, again, the farmlands do not support the population size. The people that are in a small village should be 90% farmers. And it just fucking isn't in D&D. You have a blacksmith and a baker. And like, where's the grain coming from, guys? Come on now. So we've got people that are hermits, right? And so you have your one little shack in the middle of nowhere. Might be somewhere to stop off if you're desperate. There's also a lot of like ruins and things out in the middle of nowhere. They're going to be where you have landmarks. So these landmarks are going to be unique things. Ruins or a wizard tower that's kind of halfway between a hermit and somewhere where you can go stay on the outskirts for a little while. You have hamlets, villages, forts. Am I correct? Is a fort just a defensible village?
More or less. It's got some basic amenities, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think the fortification is right in the name.
But in a medieval society, shouldn't almost every city have walls of some sort?
We got to the point where we didn't need to because we expanded out that farmland around far enough and hunted the dangerous animals that were in proximity to the point where they weren't a problem.
Right, but we didn't have orcs or dragons or bullets.
The fort is considered a permanent army post. So without an army there, it is not a fort. It's just a walled town.
Okay.
So I guess the fortification applies more to the
army fortification.
to the army as opposed to the actual building.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you could, in theory, have a fort with no walls if it's an army's...
If it's fortified strong enough by an army.
Yeah.
It usually does have walls and other
Usually, yeah.
structures because you're fortifying a place because it's supposed to be a permanent location.
Okay. All right, yeah, I'm on board with
According to a quick Google.
So, above fort we have town. Usually bigger than towns are port towns. Port towns tend to just be bigger just because there's more goods going through. There's more people. Then cities. Sometimes cities are supported or support castles. So castles can be pretty fucking big. And they tend to promote city growth around them. And then you've got a metropolis. I have trouble justifying a metropolis in a fantastical setting, although I will have the odd one once in a while. But again, how are you supporting this many people with so many different needs?
For me, it depends on how rampant magic is.
That's
If
just it.
magic is easy as going to your corner store and picking up a book or a scroll, then I have no issue with Metropolis because there's magic to help you grow plants.
This is why I like Sharn and why I like Sigil and Waterdeep. Like, there's magic built into these cities.
Oh yeah, I mean Waterdeep's got the tower, the large giant.
The walking statues.
Yeah.
the other thing to think about once we've decided what size, like where we're going to put this, based on geography, how big we want it to be, we then got to start looking at the politics of it as well, because a lot of times you walk into a village and every village has a mayor for some reason. And I don't know why that is, because villages don't have mayors. They have like council members. They've got a magistrate. They've got one noble family that has run the place for the last.
I think mayors get an all-inclusive catch-all for all these positions, because yes, each different size would have a different person in charge, but that's a lot for people to remember. Not just the DM, but players.
Yeah.
Like, oh, am I talking to the town's lord, or the mayor, or the inquisitor, or the Timbuktu, right?
Yeah, is this the Baron I'm
just
speaking
call
to?
it a mayor or call it a lord and be done with it.
Yeah, so we normally have the higher ups, still working my way down. King/president/cardinal. They tend to rule cities. You've got counselors and senators. You've got governors, and then sometimes a governor or a baron or a mayor can be the same thing, but sometimes you'll have a mayor underneath a governor as well. And then you have stewards or reeves as well that are just kind of basic advocates for the people that are there. If you have a small village of 400 people, you might just have a reeve, and that's it. Like, you may not even have a mayor. There may not be a political structure. There are no elections that are happening here. Everyone just says, yeah, that's the person in charge of making these decisions when we need to,
He's the guy that lives in the big house on the hill.
But that's going to determine, when the harvest festival is gonna happen. Shit like that, right? So,
Yeah.
But then we got to look at the guards, the rangers, the police that actually enforce the rules. So we've got the military structure involved. We've got, are there internal police as well, or just a sheriff and deputy, a constabulary, right? Are there investigators and inspectors like there are in some of the large settlements? Because some of the smaller ones won't be able to just have a private investigator on top of their city guard, right? Are there conscripts and mercenaries and militia in this area? Is everybody a volunteer firefighter? Probably. Who's on the volunteer police force, right? If you're in a small enough community, there might not be a police force. There may be 3 or 4 big tough guys that are on call. There's a problem down in city or the town square.
Round up the posse.
Pretty much, that shit exists.
Yeah.
And then there's different organizations and guilds that you might have, like mercenary guilds or protection guilds of some sort, or organized crime that provides protection. And then you have unofficial leaders, like guild leaders, community leaders, nobles, merchants, or even just some entertainers, right? That can sit there and like a town crier almost. That's not necessarily a leader, but is up to speed on the news and knows where everything is and kind of has a feel of the pulse of the city that you're in. So that's a lot to think about before we've even really populated this village, but kind of the structure that we're in. I almost went off on a rant about the different kinds of politics, like a meritocracy or an aristocracy, or there are so many different. Are we run by religious leaders? Are we run by? Is there an election cycle? Is it?
Let us break down the feudal system.
Exactly, and we're not going to do that. But again, that's another thing to think about when you're going through this. So, how do you just? Oh, let's roll dice. I'm going to roll dice again. I want the yellow one.
I want that one.
Okay.
13.
10. 13. Roll off.
16.
All right, Dave, you're first.
Yes.
How do you decide where to put your settlements when you're world building?
I open up the book and I see where Wizards has placed it.
When you are world building.
I guess I don't really. I haven't really sat down and drawn a map in maybe ever. I kind of come up to, you guys are in this settlement already. You guys move on to the next settlement. I don't really think about it. It just has the features that settlements would have. It has access to water.
All right, hold on. Let me change the question then. But first, James, do you ever world build, or are you just permanent player?
Permanent player at this point. I've done world building for other stories and stuff I've worked on, and it's kind of as need based.
Yeah.
So if there's 2 massive kingdoms and one major road leading out of both of them, that crossroad, there'd be a city there. No questions asked.
Yeah, absolutely.
So stuff like that where it kind of makes sense there should be one. Or even sometimes when it doesn't make sense, and that can give you a reason why is there a city here? There's got to be something around, at least at some point.
So let me ask then, when you're world building, the easiest way to do it, and what I always suggest to everybody, is go small, build big. Don't go big and build small, because you'll just get stuck in the minutia and the details forever. You will never finish. But if you start off with, here's my small little village, it's on a road. And your vague idea, the road goes from east to west and there's a city on each side, but you don't really know, right? Like, you haven't gotten that far yet. Do you guys build small and think about just like what I need for this story is, and that's how big the settlement's going to be, and then expand from there? Or do you have an overarching idea of kind of the country, the realm, the story you're going to be telling?
I kind of do both at the same time. So I'll start why the characters are in this small town and what's going to kick them out.
Yeah.
But why are they leaving the small town? How is that story connected back? How is that story connected to this? So I kind of build a base design of how the world looks.
Okay.
Of how the world will see that village, of how the village sees the world. And then you can add from there.
Okay.
I mean, I think I keep it pretty tunnel vision. I keep it kind of what we're doing is what we're doing. I don't really think...
You run tight campaigns with specific goals.
Yeah, so no, I don't really think about the other stuff. There might be a couple of like bullet points that I've gotten written in a notebook that I want to hit at some point. Mm-hmm. But that's about as far as I go.
Does this mean that you guys don't expect a sandbox very much? You stick to the railroad?
Oh, I expect a sandbox because I like to sandbox DMs. Like Kyle we were playing with. And he was talking about, we were going into a new town, and I pretended that I knew some noble house in the town.
Sure.
And Kyle tries to have the argument with me back and forth of that I don't know these nobles. And I start asking him questions about all the nobles in town. And his characters don't know it, like his NPCs.
Sure, I mean, because
I'm that type of player that I would know all those nobles in town and how they're connected to that town, because I would ask that question. Mm-hmm. Because that may be useful for me later. I don't know.
Have you ever tried playing a character that isn't James?
No. Have you ever tried playing a character that isn't Dave?
Yes.
When? Name one.
Exactly.
Yeah, fuck right off.
All of them are you.
Every one of them.
All of them are variations of you.
It's just you from a different angle.
No.
Yes.
This is the Funhouse Mirror version of Dave. Every one of them.
Every single one of them.
Name one that isn't.
The only one I haven't played that has been my Tortle, which I played with Adam.
Yeah. And that one wasn't James.
No.
Fletherin wasn't.
Fletherin absolutely was. Fletherin walked into the room, didn't talk to a fucking soul, stared at everyone, and when it was time to pop off, was the handiest fighter in the room, that was just willing to fucking murder things. Not gonna start shit, but will end shit. And is gonna let everybody else do their own thing, but if this gets too complicated, I'm going to bed.
Don't even try, Dave.
Yeah, that was fucking you.
Don't even try. You're worse than me.
It was just a gender-bent Dave. That's all that was. Did we learn something here, Dave?
No. I refuse.
We learned he didn't learn anything.
Trying to think of other characters. I mean...
Gunther the Hunter.
Call of Cthulhu doesn't count.
Call of Cthulhu doesn't count? Alright.
Because, I mean, like, I'm not...
Arndt.
We haven't really... Okay, Arndt is my current Thursday character. He is a half-orc paladin who's an entertainer. He's the guy that's going to get up into the tavern at the end of the night and, like, perform with his stories. Mm-hmm. But he's such a surfer, bro. Right? That's not me.
He's just a stoner.
Yeah, sure, Dave. You're absolutely not the entertainer, he says on the podcast. Hold on. James, have you ever had on your resume the word actor before?
No.
Dave, have you?
No.
No, but should you have, because you've been an actor?
Yes.
Have you been cast in actually multiple short films?
I do more behind the scenes work.
In multiple short films? I mean, you're usually fighting zombies, but there we go. Like, Dave, just shades of you, bud.
I mean, I did have, like, the work ID that said actor on it. Because I was a zombie for a few months, right?
Yep. However, Zenthos was very much just prime 100%, like, boiled down to the core version of who Dave wants to be.
Confidently incorrect. What?
a Leonin barbarian that listens to fucking no one.
Now listen to me.
Default right now, yes, you're playing a fairy who is a ranger who has just been like, I'm not interested in the fae and their bullshit. I don't want any of this nonsense.
No, I smell like brownies. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah. See, that's another way. All right, moving on.
I don't think I'm ready to move on.
Clearly, you need to move on.
Yeah, you need to move on characters, Dave.
I don't like this.
All right, beyond magic items, is there anything that you would think about that would be useful trade? Like, what is one thing when you've got a merchant or a shop in a settlement that you think would be interesting for a plot hook, something that people don't think about when they're world building? Like, the first thing that always comes up to my head is I will not have docks without having fishmongers around. There's always fishmongers. Not just...
You just want to say fishmonger over
I
and over.
do love the word monger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that a kind of, like, comic book, James? Monger?
Maybe? Manga is a thing.
There you go.
But I wouldn't be surprised if monger was also a thing. Because there's manhwa as well.
No, that's what manga is, but in, like, in the South of the United States. I'm not reading that monger. Dave, do you have any unique trade or good or service besides magic that people don't think about for their medieval fantasy settings?
No, I don't really like bog my games down with that kind of thing. I say bog down like it's such a hassle to do. But
I never think about grain farmers. Fuck them.
no, not really. I mean, other than you're stopping to help these farmers. If they ask me what these farmers are farming, I haven't gone that. I haven't prepped that. I don't know. Let me look.
Pumpkins. It's pumpkins.
Yeah. Right, but so no, not I don't particularly no.
James,
Spell components. That's never brought up ever.
I think it's brilliant. Every apothecary that I have has got an herb garden in the back, which is just like there are walls between some of the herbs because you can't let them touch. Right? Like I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
The spell components. I also like to trade in fantastical beast parts. We have an ivory trade here. You damn well know there's going to be like. A giant skeleton that has been polished and bleached and is on display in the corner of the tavern, right? Like, there will be mammoth heads mounted in City Hall. Like, there's going to be beast and creature monstrosity parts out there. I bet taxidermy's intense.
Oh, probably.
Well, even the what's it called? The Amazon D&D show. The
Vox Machina.
Yeah, the Critical Role.
Yeah.
They've got the underlying story with the guild that hunts fantastic creatures and stuff, right? Like the
other thing that I did, which kind of shocked everybody, it confused them at first, was I had a farm that was an apiary, so they just raised bees. Of course, there would be that shit, right? Honey would be a commodity in ancient times.
Oh, you need it for mead,
right? Like, absolutely. It never goes bad, right? So it would absolutely be something that people would want lots of, but we never think about just having like beehives. So, do you prefer to DM games in larger or smaller settlements, and why?
Oh, I guess smaller, just because there's less distraction. I can't stress enough that I just really like these tight 2-3 hour games that we just run through it and away we go. The more options there are, the more we're going to get bogged down with that, and the more we're focusing on one person when there's 6 of us at the table. I try to move on pretty quickly from that.
Fair. You also have shorter sessions than I do.
Yes, I also don't have
the attention span of your players.
Exactly. Yeah. So I can't just...
I've got some really committed players, right? And it's taken a long time. It's taken decades for me to get a table full of committed players that are not just blowing off steam on a Thursday night, right?
Yeah, like I know that if I sat down and gave Kyle the opportunity to take advantage of some of these things, he absolutely would. But I also know that Anthony, fuck you, Anthony, would be sitting on his phone watching his, hockey team.
Or trying to stay awake.
Yeah, or shooting me again.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got a beat on everyone I've ever DM'd for. I can usually tell whether or not they want to engage with a larger or smaller town. And the only one that I actually have a problem with ever was James. Because he would engage with absolutely everything and he would want to break it. And if he breaks it in a small town, I can recover. But if he breaks the fucking royal line in my castle,
Wasn't able to do that one though.
We hadn't gotten there yet.
Yeah, you didn't let me get there. I was close.
The campaign fizzled out before we got to that point.
I even got myself back alive so I could do that.
What do you prefer to DM?
As like you kind of both said, it depends on the party.
Yeah.
There are certain parties I'd be happy to have in a big town because they won't get lost in the minutia, and they even if they do go break something, it will be done in, I'm not going to say an intelligent way, but a way that the story can be brought about with it.
Yeah.
Whereas there's other people I've played with that I would never let them into a big town. I would never let them be able to break something that is anything close to important. Because they'd break it in the dumbest way possible, a way that can't be recovered, and the whole story kind of needs to be thrown away.
The other thing to talk about in this conversation too is the people who are knowledgeable, like what's their wheelhouse in real life as well. For example, I could run an entire campaign out in the wilderness with like 2 or 3 very small villages for Dave and Dan to dick around in. You guys would have a blast, just like owning the fucking wilderness. I couldn't do that with Mieka. She wouldn't know what to do with the downtime. She wouldn't be able to handle, like, she does her rest and then she leaves again.
Do her D&D characters sleep outdoors?
No. No, they absolutely do not.
No, they don't camp at all, huh?
Almost never.
No.
Like, she will always try to sleep in the wagon if she can. Hard stop. But Dave doesn't want, if I was like, hey, Dave, we're going to play an urban campaign. You have done your 8 hours today of adventuring. You have 16 hours before, tomorrow morning when you're supposed to meet this person. What do you want to do in town? You always say, well, I'm going to have some food. I'll probably get drunk and go to bed.
Yeah.
There's no exploring the town. There's no talking to merchants. There's no, like, I could send Mieka and Casey out to just go shopping, and they could milk about 4 sessions consecutively out of a shopping spree and be absolutely fine with it. But they would want to roll 2 dice and be done hunting. I could have Dave and Justin and Dan, and Terry go hunting out in the woods, and we could get into the minutia of it, right? There would be survival rolls all over the place. You guys would have a blast with it. I said shopping spree, and Dave almost rolled his eyes. I could see the tension go, fuck, please don't do that.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah. So
I don't want to talk to people in general. Social situations give me anxiety. I don't want that in my fun game.
where do you land on that, James? Would you rather be in the wilderness for an entire campaign or be in a city for an entire campaign as a player?
That depends on the DM.
That's fair. That's a good point.
Yeah, I have some DMs that aren't particular. Like Kyle, I would rather be in the wilderness,
Yeah.
or in an underground, something where you don't have a lot of social interaction, because I'm able to get under Kyle's skin as a human being. So he always reacts as his NPCs back at me.
Yeah.
And that's not good for either of us.
Yeah, I can
I start
imagine.
pissing him off, and I'm like, oh, I just continue to push these buttons because he's mad. And I'm like, oh, wait, now Kyle's mad at me. And not the NPC. Kyle's mad at me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Whereas you could fucking go at me all day. And
Yeah, and you'd be perfectly fine.
Yeah. If you build a settlement for your campaign, do you draw a map for it, or do you just keep it in your head?
Depends on the value of the settlement to the story.
Okay, let's say you're going to spend... Look, if you're going to spend 10 sessions, you draw a map.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend 1 session, you
don't need it.
So 4 sessions. Do you bother to throw down a little sketch? Or?
Yes, 100% every time, because it's, here is what it is. I don't have to explain it. Here is a picture. Look at it. Move on.
Okay.
Here's a reference for you later. You want to go to the blah, look at the map. Move on.
It cuts down on confusion.
Yep, we're all on the same page. It's right there.
You put like, hey, here's the blacksmith, here's the tavern, here's the
Yep.
graveyard. Done, right?
Yep.
Like labeled and everything.
Yep.
For me, if it's just something like blacksmith, graveyard, cleric's house, and that's it, and they're not going to be doing anything story-wise.
It's called a temple. It's not the cleric's house.
Cleric's house. The cleric's house is all that matters. Yeah. But if that's all they're doing there, there's nothing story-wise, there's nothing they're accomplishing, they're just kind of hanging out in this area, I wououldn't bother drawing it. It's a waste of my time.
It's got to be important. It's got to be useful.
If there's a reason for it, I'll give
Yeah.
them a map. If there's nothing important here and you won't get a map, and that's a good way for my players to know there's nothing important in this town.
Fair.
Like, if you want to get stuff done, downtime, go to the hawker to get your horses shoot again, whatever, we can get that all done here. It'll all be available here. But nothing else is important here.
I will almost always try to give a world map and battle maps. I will not bother with city maps as a general rule. As a matter of fact, you guys have been in the same city for how long, Dave? Like, better part of 2023, you've been in the same town?
In Mad Mage?
No, in our campaign.
Oh, in your yeah.
And I still have not provided a city map.
Yeah.
And I much prefer having everybody just kind of be relatively on the same page in their imagination.
Yes, but as a DM, you excel at descripting things. Like you're very...
Or even describing them.
No, descripting.
Okay.
Yeah. James...
But more to your point, actually.
Yeah, right? Like, that's not something I'm very good at. I don't articulate my points well. I don't articulate my thoughts well. So that's something that I do genuinely, like, in everyday life, struggle with. I'm not going to put myself in that situation when I'm DMing, you know?
Okay. What about you? Do you build maps for, like, 4 sessions?
Importance once again.
Yeah.
Even if they're there for 4 sessions and nothing important's happening,
You're not gonna.
then I don't need a map.
Yeah. Okay.
But I like to think that it's going to be up to them to decide whether or not it's important. I will give them this hook.
I know everything.
Decide it's important.
Well, exactly. I haven't given them a hook for this town, or the hook I'm giving them is the blacksmith next door can put shoes on your horses. That's your hook. Cool.
Actually, when I was running the False Hydra, are you familiar with the False Hydra?
No, I don't
Okay,
think so.
The False Hydra is essentially a gigantic creature that lives underground in a settlement that is consistently singing all of the time and is wiping the minds of people. Or not wiping the minds, they are invisible as long as they're singing.
Mm-hmm.
When they eat somebody, which they do, they've got all, like, they're kind of like a Hydra, right?
Yeah.
And so all these heads on long necks are popping up out of the ground, Tremors style, and eating people. And when they do, once they've eaten that person, they then wipe the mind of anyone that can hear the song to not remember that person existed anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So all memory of that person is gone. And that creates cognitive dissonance. There are people that are sad because they feel lost, but they don't know why. They have to justify to themselves, why is there, woman's clothing hanging up in my closet? I've never been married, but their wife was eaten yesterday, right? So there's these weird, like, mental gymnastics. Sometimes it drives people crazy. Other times people go completely, like, invasion of the body snatchers. Everything is normal. We're all fine. This is good. And sometimes people are, like, they know something's wrong, but they don't know what. So I dropped my players into that. We had a decent break from playing, and one of our players, Mieko, of course, went home. And so I just suddenly dropped them. They were on a cliffhanger. They were climbing the outside of a house, and the next thing they know, they're walking into town, and they don't know why. And it took 6 sessions to figure out what was going on, and this thing murdered a bunch of people. That nearly killed the entire town off.
I thought I had just missed a session, and I was too nervous to speak up. And I was just waiting for people to fill in the blank. I'm joking.
But, like, it was very much like they showed up in town and found that they'd already checked into the hotel. They were traveling without their bags or their adventuring gear. As they walked in town, like, well, where's all our shit? And then they found it in their room in the hotel. And so there was this real weird sense of trying to figure out what the mystery was. They thought they were time traveling for a little while. They thought the gods were fucking with them for a little while. Finally, they figured out after sessions that all of this shit was going on. But I knew what my plot hook was. And the plot hook is, you guys are going to spend some time in this town, and every day you're going to see the characters, all the NPCs, doing what's normal to them, but as some of the NPCs, like there were 2 dwarves that had a pet badger they would take for a walk every day. On day 3, it was 1 dwarf taking a pet badger for a walk. On day 5, there's a dwarf, very sad, very confused, walking through town square holding a leash and not knowing why. Right? And I was slowly adding these details, but it was every building that you're in. So I knew the plot hook, so I built town square. I gave them a map, and I said, here are the NPCs, here's the map, so that they knew where they could go, and this is where the plot hooks are. When you guys traveled out into the rest of town, no map. It's just hand wave, because the plot hook isn't here. It's in town square, right? So I think that very much speaks to what you were talking about, James. So let's talk about realism for a second. Outhouses, wells, farmlands, merchants, drawbridges, guardhouses, and open acreages for grazing livestock. How realistic do you get into city planning?
I mean, I don't get super into it. I just kind of like hit the main ones, the stuff that they're likely to deal with. If they're a spellcaster, there'll be somewhere they can get components. If they're a druid, there's somewhere that they can get, I don't know, shillelaghs, whatever. Yeah. What is it the druids do? I don't know.
That's not how that works.
Shillelagh, according to Guppy.
Yeah, a pet store? Is that... So, I don't know. But, there's stuff to cater to the players, and that's about as far as I'll go.
Yeah, same here. If they need it, it's there. If the town's surrounded by a wall, it's got a gate. If they're surrounded by a moat because there's a river nearby, it's got a drawbridge. Like,
After that, it's ask me what you're looking for, and I'll tell you if the city has it. Do you need a cooper to do things?
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
So it's funny that you bring that up because we're going to talk about Coopers here in a second. So I very much am the same way. Like, I'll put the thought into this to make it make sense, but it's at the population level. When I sit there and say I want 15,000 people here, I go, how much farmland? 25 square miles. Everything else is done by trade, and we'll put a major river nearby to cover my ass on that. But I'm not getting into, well, this farm has this many people living on it, and no, don't worry about that shit. Like, if we need to, I will build a farm later, right? There are a lot of people that like to get into the nitty gritty, and I think about like George R.R. Martin. You fucking know that guy plotted out every shop in King's Landing. His world building was intense, but then because it's not reality, it also doesn't hold up sometimes. Like, where's the Night Watch getting their food from? And don't say hunting. Like, where are these guys living their entire lives in the Arctic? How are they getting food? Because they're not farming, and there's not a whole fuck lot of trade that goes up there.
Yeah, they went over. They send supplies to them.
Sure.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Through the winters, they're doing that. They're
Yeah.
sending. Yeah, okay. I don't buy that for a fucking second.
Me
Like
neither.
hand wave that shit, fine, but it falls apart at some point, right? So I don't know. Like, I'll put sewers in because I like to go kill rats in sewers, but I will also have outhouses sometimes in the same city that has sewers because it's not a perfect infrastructure yet, right?
Look, that makes sense. When I go camping at some of these like glampy sites,
Yeah.
they'll have flush toilets, but in the wintertime, they shut those all off because they freeze and break.
Yeah.
So there are outhouses as well, right? Like, of course, there's going to be...
And that's my other thing too, is if I don't have rivers and fresh water and stuff, I will often, just as I'm building my maps, throw down wells. I always have that in the back of my mind. Put in a well. Just put in a well. You can always do something in a well. There's all sorts of adventures and bodies and horror and trinkets and items, and there's always something you can put in a well.
Timmy.
So, put Timmy in the well. Let's talk for a second about buildings and services within a city. And I'm going to whip through this real fucking fast. All right? So, because there's a lot that can go into these medieval cities that we don't think about anymore. Stop me when you don't recognize a term or something, okay? So, starting off with merchants, we have coopers, cartwrights, chandlers. Actually, it occurs to me that some people may not know what these are as I'm listening out loud. Coopers are barrel makers. Cartwrights are, well, they make carts. Chandlers are candle makers. There are wheelers that make the wheels for the carts. There are...
Well, that's what Wolf did in Future Man, right? He was the wheel guy.
Such a deep cut. If you haven't seen Future Man...
You're missing out.
Yeah, you're missing out, but it is very rated R. Very rated R. As a matter of fact, I think I talked for about... I've mentioned on about 7 or 8 episodes a Warriors main, and I've never had anybody bring it up, so I know nobody's watching Future Man.
There you go.
But, yeah. Have you seen it, James?
I don't think so.
I think you'd fucking like it.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Yeah, it's kind of up your alley of just, like, ridiculous shit. So, it is a rated R extreme version of Idiocracy.
Okay.
In a lot of ways. It's in the same conversation.
I guess. I suppose.
It's also an Idiot's Guide to Terminator.
Yeah, there's lots of time travel.
So,
Yeah.
anyway. So, we also have drapers, rope makers, rug makers, and weavers. And there's, like, weaver was a big industry. Up until, like, the automation started to happen, or we could have machines do the weaving for us. But, like, weavers were, like, that was intense. We also have all sorts of clothing makers and stylists. You have tailors, depending on different materials that are available. You might have different tailors that are specialists in like silks or different kinds of textiles.
Denim.
Denim. Spinsters, cobblers, which are all about shoes. They're actually about repairing shoes. There's actually different kind of like shoemakers is a different thing as well.
Shoesmith.
Shoesmith. You have glove makers and purse makers. Someone has to make those burlap sacks and bags, and that's the purse maker.
Is it actually called a purse maker?
Yep.
Because I know
Yep.
a lot of that stuff would be made with hides, and that would be done by a tanner.
The tanner would prepare the leather.
But he doesn't process it. Okay.
That's right. And,
Sure.
there's a difference between a tanner and a leatherer. The tanner tans the leather. The leatherer works it into shapes.
Sure, leather. Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes sense.
There's a haberdashery, which is all about hats. I've got tanners and leatherers on here, leatherers on here. But also remember that there are barbers as well. When was the last time your D&D player got a haircut?
Never.
Never. And for the most part, that's fine because we all play D&D for 3 months, like in world at a time. Like you don't go to get a haircut in 3 months. The average person.
Well, I'm gonna now.
Yeah.
We also get hit by like fireballs quite often, so I'm sure most of us have singed ends.
Well, also, I feel like if you cut my hair after a long rest, it has healed back to its regular
Well,
level.
obviously. 4 hours only for elves, though.
But you gotta remember too that barbers used to be like
Surgeons.
they
too.
used to be surgeons and bloodletters
dentists.
and dentists and like it's a big deal. There were also bathhouses that were like communal bathhouses for getting clean, but also for like relaxation as well. So, and then there are smiths on top of that. You have your regular blacksmith, which just does basic metalworking. But there are gemsmiths and jewelers and what's called whitesmiths as well. Do you guys know what a whitesmith is?
Isn't it gold?
It's any precious metal. So
Okay.
so a whitesmith would be a goldsmith or a silversmith or a tinsmith a lot of the time as well.
I guess tin was considered precious at a point.
Yeah. And then we have all sorts of tinkerers, buckle makers, locksmiths, and clock makers. Every one of those is different. Somebody is counting those grains of sand in that hourglass, right? And it's not going to be the guy working at the general store.
Well, you have to count pretty high to count that much sand.
That would be the grocer. Counting all that, because...
It's funny, we're heading there next.
Okay,
Dave.
all right.
The delicatessen.
So, for food, we have grocers, bakers, butchers, spice merchants, fishmongers, but you also have smokehouses where people will work consistently, and they'll be relatively large because a lot of hunts will bring a lot of meat in that has to be processed.
That's how
very
you
quickly.
preserve it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have brewers, millers, and that's going to be different from your granary or your silo. But you also have water towers that need to be maintained as well, and a lot of people would have water towers, and a lot of buildings would have large catch basins for rain as well. And then we've got the people in charge of animals. Everything from farmers to shepherds to stablers, people that run kennels, which is going to be a major factor for a lot of people that go hunting, right? You have hunting dogs. You have then the people that support that, the saddle makers, the farriers, and the veterinarians. And there will be all sorts of veterinarians in a medieval society. As a matter of fact, I'd say there's probably like magic-based veterinarians and saddle makers and stuff too. Like the average one can make a saddle for a horse. This guy's going to be able to do it for a warg or a drake, because they're going to move differently, so they'll have different needs, right?
Yeah.
And then beyond that, we also have just kind of general laborers, but this includes people like foresters. It was an industry to cut down trees and provide firewood to the people in the cities, in the towns and whatnot. Your daily job, day after day, go out, chop wood, haul that shit back into town. Carpenters are different than foresters. They process wood and create things out of it. There are wood carvers, so for even finer woodworking. We have miners, masons, stoneworkers, and sculptors. But there's also groundskeepers and gardeners as well. And then painters, and I didn't realize this. I was surprised. Bleachers. That was a real industry for a long, long
Where
time.
they whitewash the homes?
Yeah, they'd go and they would whitewash homes, and they would dump chemicals or paints on roofs and stuff for protecting from the elements as well. It never occurred to me that would be a thing, and it absolutely is.
Didn't occur to me to be a named thing.
Right? Yeah. I just kind of assumed that would be your basic home repair, but no, that was an industry. So, and of course, there's other things like chimney sweeps and sewer workers and stuff as well. But Then we get into the civil aspects of a civilization. And I've broken those up into kind of 3 categories as well. So there's the social ones, which are churches, temples, and altars. You have orphanages, taverns, inns and hotels, town hall, city hall, longhouse, guild halls, town squares and message boards. You have marketplaces, gardens, and monuments. All of these things exist out there, and they need to be, there's upkeep to them. There's design and there's purpose to them. When was the last time that somebody added a bookbinder to their city? Not just a library, but a bookbinder. There is... Hey, you know what I really like about Theros is it's Greek themed, and there's like philosophers that they talk about. I feel like philosophers should always be an industry. Like, people should be able to just be a philosopher and be supported, because I think it's important to have ethics, and they are the people. And
But ethics are so annoying.
They get in the way.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the wrong 2 people here, but the places where they used to meet were actually called gymnasia and commons. And so there would be, if you've got philosophers in your cities, if that's kind of your city structure, you would have these like auditoriums almost.
Sick and play dodgeball.
No, not that kind of gymnasia. But there are schools and universities, hospitals and apothecaries. You've got arenas and pitches as well, scribes and copyists, palaces, lamplighters, town criers, and street performers.
Don't forget waker-uppers.
Waker-uppers. That's it.
Actual job where they tapped on your window to wake you up.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Well, it's Friday.
This is your 6 a.m. wake-up call.
When we think about some of the other things that you can find in here, you're going to be able to look at a lot of fortifications. We mentioned walls and gates. James mentioned moats earlier, and of course bridges, towers, turrets. You will have armorers, weaponsmiths, which won't be blacksmiths. A lot of people make that mistake. A blacksmith can sharpen a sword, but is not going to make a sword. They're going to make a cast iron version of a sword in a sword shape, right? So beyond weapon makers, you also have scabbard makers, which was a unique thing.
Your general toolsmiths as well, right?
Yeah. Fletchers, which of course make arrows. There will be a gallows somewhere in the city. This will be located pretty close to a dungeon or a jail. They are different.
I thought you were going to say close to a dungeon or a dragon, but sorry.
There will be a barracks and an armory and a guardhouse, and there's going to be ports. And ports will have a lot of this stuff, like guardhouses and walls and gates and towers all around them as well. And then beyond that, we of course have houses and tenements, warehouses, courthouses, and spaces for lawyers and advocates. There will be toll booths, sheds, banks and treasuries, inner bridges and inner walls like they had of Minas Tirith. Like, it wasn't just outer walls. There were rings to these cities, right? We have aqueducts, and as we've said over and over again, sewers. There's a lot of shit that goes into building a city, and I know I've missed stuff. This is the bare bones. And that was a huge fucking list.
I don't think you brought up brothels, which I think is probably a major industry in a lot of these little one-stop towns.
Yeah, I said...
Did you?
I said inns and hotels. I just kind of assume there's always I always have a hooker in the corner of a tavern or a brothel or of an inn. There's always just that one person sitting by themselves at the bar. And my players, I guess you're new to this group, newish anyway. Dan and Casey and Megan know not to go talk to that person at the bar. It's going to get uncomfortable quickly.
Excellent.
So, I don't recommend adding a brothel to every campaign. But, you know, you do you.
Well, like a lot of our suggestions, play by your table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find they can be good for a little bit of intrigue. You can get some story out of
They're,
that.
yeah, a great place to have political information.
People
to be
are
brought up.
listening. Yes.
Yeah, there's always ears in the brothel, so you can find out which political leaders have done what with whom.
Yeah.
and use it as blackmail or counter blackmail to try to stop someone from being blackmailed from the location. Like, you don't have to focus on sex while at the brothel. There's a lot of other things you can do that are interesting.
And the brothel doesn't have to be just sex. Like, you could probably get the same if you wanted to have that level of intrigue and not have it be a sex thing. You could have it at a bathhouse or at fuck, the word is escaping me now. Where you go smoke hookah.
A hookah den.
Hookah den. Thank you. Isn't there a specific word for that?
Probably.
But like there
Not in English.
not in English. Yeah, okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
But there will be places besides taverns where there will be communal areas for people to get together, and you're going to know who knows who. The politician and the baker will never cross paths in their daily life, but they became friends at the bathhouse, and now the baker knows that, so on and so forth, and here's your intrigue, right? Like, you could very much go down these roads, but let's grab dice because I have a few final questions.
Six.
14.
16. Okay, I'm talking to myself. When you think about population sizes, you obviously have to start removing some of these buildings and services, but there's some that are necessary for all settlements, like shelter, food and water, and security. What's one building or occupation from this massive list that would be very out of place in a hamlet or a small village? And can you tie a plot hook to it? For example, I think the thing that pops up in my head is if you were to have a massive bank in the middle of a 40-person town.
Yeah, why? What's going on here?
Right, and so the plot hook would be that there was a dragon's horde here, and instead of carting the dragon's horde out and into the city, they just built a bank on top of it, and they've got security here. And so if you want to drop off gold or come get gold or want to, this is kind of a waypoint out in the outskirts of the civilization, where you can go pick up a bunch of riches, and maybe there are even like it's a well fortified, very small hamlet, and you've got the nobles and stuff keep all of their riches out here because it's so well defended because it's so small, and they always know everybody, right? That lives in the town, so every stranger gets vetted.
For me, something like a high-quality, multi-purpose gallows, so you can do 5-6 people in a small town of 150 people. Why the hell do they have a gallows that can do like a third of everyone at once? It used to be where they took all the prisoners of war. It's where they dealt with them. As you're marching back to town, they go up to the gallows and their equipment gets put in carts and brought back to town.
Like the village's name is like Judgment or something too. Like they...
Rope's End, something like that.
Yeah, they've got the town actually popped up around this execution site because people come out to watch other people get executed and then need to stay for a couple of days. So first a tavern, then an inn, then a couple of small farms, and now here we are.
And the ropes guy to make more ropes for the gallows, a new carpenter to fix it.
That's dark as fuck, but I really like it. Dave?
Damn, James. So I was...
Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised, but that's... Anyways. I kind of went a little bit backwards. You guys went with things that would be like out of place kind of in the rural setting. I was thinking more what's out of place in the urban setting. Right?
Sure.
And I'm thinking like you're walking down, you see all these beautiful houses, beautiful, storefronts and everything. But then all of a sudden, right in the middle of town, there's a forest. You don't get that very often. That's kind of that's weird. That stands out.
There's not a whole lot of Central Park in medieval settings.
That's not a forest. That's a park. That's different, right? Like, I'm talking like you go into this and it is forest, right? Untouched, undisturbed land that is completely surrounded by the same city. Like, that's...
Do you have a plot hook for that?
Why is that there? That's weird. Is this some sort of, like, druid outpost that they've been hanging on to? Like, what's going on in the underbelly of this?
So I want to say it's in Theros, but I don't remember what book it's from, where they have the golden stag. And the golden stag is
just Theros. I have the card.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And the golden stag is not something to be hunted, but it appears right before a major event as a blessing or an omen of some kind.
Yeah,
right?
I remember this.
And so maybe it always appears in this patch of forest. And so the royal family or the noble houses come together to protect this patch of land to bless the city. because if we remove the forest, the golden stag might not show up. That would be, I think, one of the plot hooks. And then, like, there are people that are consistently camping out in the forest to try to see the golden stag.
Yeah.
Or you have, I'm a member of the Stag Watch, and it's part of the clerics or the men of the cloth. They have to do a period of time just camping and communing with nature, and maybe they'll see the golden stag.
Well, that's kind of cool.
And there's the one homeless guy outside the bar that I saw the stag 6 years ago.
Back when I saw the stag.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about it. Noble districts, merchant districts, poor districts, and ports. What other unique or interesting sections of a city might exist for a D&D player to explore? I am very, very much about exploring the palace and the royal grounds. That's where my players want to go, and there's always shit to do there. I won't necessarily flesh out every single NPC that's there, but I will flesh out a fuck ton of them. Servants, all like chambermaids of all the way up to king and queen. I will have people at every level to interact with, and rooms at every level to explore and interact with as well. Right down to the dungeons or trophy rooms and you don't have to get too nuts with it. When you're dealing with like the palace, the castle, the royal grounds, you just have more of the same, but it's slightly different. Like we've got the west dining room. That one is all decked out in purples. And we've got the east that's all decked out in browns, right, in earth tones. And like we tend to have her side of the family here and his side of the family there. Like you just start duplicating. We have 95 guest rooms in the castle. I only have to design 4, right? And then just copy paste. James?
Mage's district.
Yeah, magic district would be good.
Yeah. Magic tools, magic supplies. A great way to give your players special magic items that they won't need for a dozen levels.
I did a magic district one time for Mieka's campaign, and I had to I went out of my way to say that this entire district is locked in an anti-magic field. You can buy this item, and the receipt is attached to it. It's tied to the item, but you can't test it till you get out of the bounds of the magic district, because there's just some things that should not mix.
I like the idea of the industrial area of town. Nobody goes into the industrial area. You're not ever talking about like the universal solvent plants.
Because industrial revolution hasn't happened yet, David.
In some places it has.
Yeah, in Sharn, they definitely had that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like there's industry, There's also going to be warehousing, like there's going to be
I have really
needs to store things.
I've really like hand waved the idea of the ports side, but like warehousing, shipbuilding, ship repair, like
there's
caverns for sailors. There's all sorts of farmers markets and shit down there as well, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the times in real world, cities have been built on top of each other for various reasons. That means that there are sprawling cities with catacombs, crypts, ruins, tunnels, and other secrets buried beneath the player character's feet. With urban settings so full of opportunities for adventure, intrigue, role-playing, and exploration, why do you think most DMs avoid urban settings? Considering, like, you can do all that exploration and shit here. In my opinion, it's because when you blow something up, you now have to justify it. Like, the consequences are real. People will know who you are. You can't be skulking around. The murder hoboism goes out the window in a major city, right? Or else, the law cracks down on you. And for a lot of people, that's not fun. So that's not what D&D has traditionally been. Although I think more and more we're getting away from that kind of...
What consequences to my actions?
I have enough of that in real life.
James?
For me, since I've now completely forgot the question, had a brain fart.
Well, why, with all of these exploration opportunities and ventures and stuff,
too much to keep track of, too many moving parts.
That's a big part of it. I mean, I have the luxury to sit down and build freaking 200-person NPC lists just to keep in my back pocket. Yeah. But especially in a metropolitan city where you want to have, everybody comes together and they look at you and go, well, you don't have any hobgoblins on your list. Are hobgoblins not in the city? Fuck, I guess I better add hobgoblins then. Or come up with a reason right now as to why there are no hobgoblins. So that could be intimidating for a lot DMs.
Well, I think about that. They lip off the guard captain as they go into the city. Well, that guard captain is going to tell his Genex commander that there's a new group of adventurers who are lipping.
Yeah.
He'll tell all the other captains to keep an eye out for this group. So now theoretically, you've pissed off all the guards by having one interaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot for a DM to keep track of and a lot of players to even think about.
Yeah. Dave?
I think there's just so much going on I've already said it, I don't really make my own settings. I tend to just dive into the pre-built campaign settings. And in order to really get the most out of it, you really need to sit down and go through 1,000 years of history.
Yep.
There's a lot of information to get through before you're even starting to really explore the world and what it is. And I'd rather just avoid that completely, sit in a small setting, small ideas, small setting, right? Like I play a small game.
And I don't want to say that your games aren't epic, because they are, but they're tight, right? Like they're very railroaded. Here is the epic quest, and this is what we are doing.
Yeah, this is the story.
Yeah, it's like a movie. Well, you play very cinematic. When you DM, you have a cinematic story to tell, and it's like in a movie. You have 90 minutes to tell your story. We don't have a whole lot of time to go dicking about in the backwoods, right? So, whereas for me, I run it like a comic book. Who knows who the main character is going to be this issue? We know who our basic team is. We're going to slowly grow over time, and there's going to be ins and outs and little plots hinted at, issues in advance and shit. So that makes sense that you wouldn't really want to dig into an urban setting like that. Something to be said too, like James, you said, like there's a lot of moving parts. How many fucking businesses do you have to name?
Yeah.
Now it's not just NPCs. I'm pretty good at just coming up with dwarf and gnome names off the top of my head right now. But like, how many different inns can I come up with? Because there's going to be 75 hotels throughout this metropolis. I don't want to fucking... Hey, do you know anywhere we can stay? The rich place, the poor place, and the in-between place. We're playing Goldilocks now. Like, I'm not getting any more detail to that. Mm-hmm. In a medieval fantasy setting, there are opportunities for unique parts of cities, for small folk, giant kin, multi-limbed creatures like centaurs, creatures with sunlight sensitivity, flyers, and amphibious creatures. What is a kind of unique building or structure or occupation that might revolve around meeting the needs of a specific kind of fantasy creature? For me, right off the bat, I'm thinking about the fact that the closer to the ports you are, the more likely you are to have rooms with sunken floors that are able to be filled with water for tritons and some of the more amphibious
merfolk.
Yeah.
Sahuagin.
Yeah, I mean, Sahuagin are evil and merfolk don't have legs, but you have Lokatha that might come in. You had, like, you're absolutely right. There's sea elves. There are, Vidalcan are amphibious and might want a more humid or water-based place. Simic hybrids. Like,
sure, there's a great one.
There's a lot of opportunities there. So that's the first thing that I think about. Is there anything
similar to that, but canals in the port cities for the merfolk and stuff to travel up and down, so they still have access to the whole city. Have small pools in different establishments, so they can go into the pubs,
like the swim up bar and stuff.
Exactly,
that's cool.
So they can still be part of the community.
That never fucking occurred to me. It
goes back to the whole inclusive thing people are now talking about in D&D, where there's wheelchairs and all that. It's inclusive to someone who can't walk on land.
We actually played in a part of an Eberron campaign. It was right out of a module. It was the Emerald Claw from 3.5. And there was a section where they were in a city, and there were these canals where the Sahuagin were kind of like in and out and bumping around and kind of, taking the canals and then getting around. And it was interesting because it's combat that they hadn't really dealt with yet. What happens when you have to fight on that third dimensional plane, right? When it's not forwards, backwards, side to side, you don't have to go down. That was very different, right? Mm-hmm. So it was kind of neat.
A lot of bridges, a lot of gondolas. Like I'm thinking of Venice now. I love Venice. Venice is my favorite city in the world. It's too bad it's sinking into the ocean, but it's
is it sinking or is the ocean rising?
First one, then the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about like there's so much giant kin and small kin, centaurs. That's my big thing that I know I've talked about on the podcast before is do you have special bathroom facilities for centaurs?
I mean, I assume they just poop like a horse, so you just give them the old poop bag. You know what I'm talking about? Like, if
I know exactly.
If you're gonna be walking around the city, you gotta have a poop bag on. It's like if I'm walking around my rural neighborhood, I am not wearing pants. But if I'm walking around my urban neighborhood, I'm wearing pants.
I'm sorry, are you Donald ducking it when you go out into the bush, Dave? Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes.
Why do you think they go to the bush together?
That's why they call it the bush?
Yeah.
No.
Before we get into any of that shit, let's cut to a brief info break.
That was an info break.
If you've been inspired by the conversation in this episode, please feel free to reach out and share your creativity and ideas with us and the rest of the community. You can reach us on Facebook and Instagram or on our subreddit r/itsAmimic. Also, if you're feeling particularly generous, please follow and subscribe and leave us positive reviews, likes, and comments. Engagements like that help us pop up on search engines and keep this show running.
Do you guys have anything else to say before we wrap up this discussion on settlements, buildings, and structures?
I guess my last thing is there's going to be shit that pops up all the time that you never thought about. Especially when you get into big urban settings, you're going to have players that are going to want to go out and go to that store and be like, hey, where can I go out and buy something like crutches, or I want a wig, or I need to re-up my shit for my disguise kit. There are magic stores like magic. I mean like magicians, like for a kid's party stores in real life where you can go in and get trick decks and folding swords and shit like that. There should be other places that exist out there that we don't think about for D&D. When that comes up, you don't have to prep it. Just prepare for it. I would rather have the merchants prepped without a business and without a structure so that I can throw them into whatever I need. So a lot of the times my prep work is prepping merchants, and I'm like, okay, who would be really neat to run a disguise kit? Obviously it's going to be a changeling, so I'm not going to go, obviously it's going to be a halfling, right? And they're just going to try to sell their little trinkety wares, right, to help you flesh it out. So I'm going to have my list of NPCs set up, and I may have, if I do this level of map making, I may make just empty stores, empty buildings that I can put shit in, right, on the fly. But obviously when it comes to encounters and stuff, I do a lot of prep work ahead of time. If combat's going to break out, I do the math, I crunch it pretty hard. When it comes to settlements and world building, I like to keep an eye on the big picture and then design in the little picture to support the big picture, right? Kind of like an umbrella. I'm not going to flesh out the whole fucking thing. I'm just going to have a couple of posts in the middle that's going to hold up the whole structure, right? So don't prep too hard. As much as I'm listing, there's cobblers and cartwrights and shepherds, and these are cool little things you can add for variety, but I'd only prep 2 or 3 of those per civilization, right? Per settlement, before I'm starting to do too much work. Dave, do you have anything?
Not really. I think we did a good job here. Yeah.
We've talked about you Donald ducking it, and this is all we can think about.
That's
now.
literally the only reason I showed up today. Just to get that off of my, I guess not chest.
Ass.
Yeah, get that off my ass.
James, any final thoughts?
No.
No, just I'm willfully blanking my mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all for this part of our discussion on settlements in D&D 5th edition. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, comment, and review to help push our engagement. And don't forget to subscribe to find future inspirations for your campaigns.
If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate button on our website, www.itsamimic.com, as well as Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
This has been an It's a Mimic production. Please check the show notes for this episode to see links, time codes, and credits, and don't forget to reach out and share your own inspirations.
I kept trying to figure out how to slide rat hole to rat hole in there, and I never got to it.
Rat hole to rat hole?
Yeah.
What?
Future Man.
Oh, from Future Man.
Yeah.
Fuck.
I hope they can hear us.
I really do.
If you can hear us, fuck.
See you next Tuesday.